Bah humbug. No, I'm just kidding. How's everyone doing? Welcome to You'll Probably Agree. And for this Christmas season, I got all cozy and snug, and I got my Santa hat on, and I'm ready to watch some great Christmas movies. And if there's one Christmas story they tell again and again and again, oh, sorry, I fell asleep. It's A Christmas Carol. But with me today is Jeff York from The Establishing Shot and Jeff York Caricatures and Mark the Movie Man Krawcheck from Special Mark Productions. Guys, thank you so much for coming on. When it comes to movies about Ebenezer Scrooge and their adaptation of Charles Dickens' classic novel, this has always been the movie I went to. But before I go deeper into it, I think we'll have Jeff. You can start first on why you seem to have hold this movie in high regard, and we'll go to Mark's thoughts and mine.
Well, for starters, I think it is the best cast of any of them, and I think they get both the sort of horror, if you will, as well as the pathos really accurate in this one. It was a stroke of genius to cast Alastair Sim, an actor who is mostly known for comedic performances, knowing full well that they needed to have him really be able to make the turn into the giddy, happy, and converted Scrooge into something that we wanted to see and was going to be an incredible climax of it. I also think because he was an actor who is primarily known for comedies, he did Charlie's Aunt and different things on the stage. He understood that the character of Ebenezer Scrooge, at the essence of it, is not some grumpy old grandpa miser, but instead a very hurt person, a person who sort of turned his back on humanity, on connection. He snubs his nephew's invitation year after year. He just wants to be left alone because he's been, dare I say, shit on in his life. He has not been treated well. He's lost a lot of people in his life, including his beloved sister. And, it just sort of made him feel, and he was blamed for the death of her, as oftentimes these kind of things are, by who's close to them and who could afford to maybe give them proper health care or whatever. But he's a very hurt man, and I think he's striking out against a world that has hurt him. And that's an empathetical and a sympathetical Scrooge, not just some rich old guy who doesn't want to part with his money. That's not it at all. He's sort of even self-denial. There's that early scene where he's at a restaurant, which he goes to a restaurant every night to eat, and he says, "Waiter, more bread. It'll cost extra, sir." No more bread. He's just kind of in this whole denial of joy, of human connection, of life and love. And when he sees that, and I don't know if you recognize this when you watch it a second time, but Alastair Sim insisted that they shoot that all in one take because he wanted to just build and build as he runs around and grabs his housekeeper and jumps about, and I'm going to stand on my head, and he stands on his head in that chair, and it's delightful. And I think that is, for me, why this really works well. I also have to say, as I've become a film critic and older person who's more and more appreciative of the techniques and care and craft of film, I love the fact that the director of this film, an Irish guy who had done some dark material, like he did a version of The Telltale Heart, but his name was Brian Desmond Hurst, and he had the simple insight to say, you know what? Charles Dickens wrote a ghost story. Let's shoot this like a horror movie. It looks like a horror movie. It sounds like a horror movie. It's scored like a horror movie. I mean, in case any kiddie out there is wondering, I wonder what this movie's about. As soon as they show the book pulled down, like, oh, it's a classic book. And here it is, A Christmas Carol, or Scrooge, as it was called in London. But you get that great Richard Adams score, that dun, 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 dun. I mean, it's like, holy crap. This is nasty, scary, frightening, hide under the covers horror. And all those are reasons that I love this. I'm sure I'll think of more as we go on, but that's sort of the 15,000 foot view, not the 35,000 foot view.
Well, that's certainly high admiration.
Under the covers view. How's that?
Yeah. Certainly not a turkey.
There you
Mark,
go.
what's your impression on Scrooge or A Christmas Carol, originally titled Scrooge, and the
Right.
U.S. made it
Yeah.
Christmas Carol?
Yeah.
I personally I enjoy a lot of different takes on it. I mean, back here I pulled it out just for this. I have narrated by Basil Rathbone, A
Right.
Christmas on vinyl. And I like different versions. I will say, if you want to talk about like complete movie from start to finish, this is probably at the top of the game. Jeff is right. It handles it like a horror story because it is a ghost story, because they used to tell ghost stories. I mean, just listen to the lyrics of some of your classic Christmas songs. And one of them even mentions telling ghost stories by the fire.
That's
Mhm.
right.
Christmas. So this feels like you're sitting around the fire and you're hearing this story. And yeah, Alistair Sim take on Scrooge is probably the one that has been most mimicked throughout the rest after this. They kind of try to capture it quite a bit, and he does have a spirit. You feel his arc in this, and overall it is a creepy movie. It's an effective movie. It feels like one that really, it shoots for the fences, so to speak, for your holiday films. And yeah, it's got a good tale to it, but it's a sharp film that's really put together well, and it's the way you want to handle it quite a bit. I was thinking about it the other day. In a way, It's a Wonderful Life is a horror film
Yeah, that's very
as
true.
well. I mean, this is made during a time when they weren't afraid to take some chances with your Christmas movies, and this one is definitely one of those at the top, to where they played it all the time when I was a kid. Is like, if there was a version of a Christmas Carol that played, it would be usually this one would be on TV as the one that they played, and the one that was referenced the most. So yeah, I mean, it's on the top of the list for me, but I like seeing variations on this story. As problematic as it was, I thought Scrooged had really good intentions, and I think if it wasn't so problematic in the background, which we learned years later, I think that would have really been a cool modern telling. It still is decent, but could have been better.
Yep.
But this one, yeah, it's pretty much the bar. It set the bar for this type of story from here on out, and they never really matched it.
Yeah.
Because this was the most sincere, I think. After this, people tried to replicate this.
Yeah. And it's funny how I think this is everyone's automatic thought when it cuts to Scrooge movies or Christmas Carol movies, and ever since I saw that one, I'm like, this one feels like the only version I care about. And, there are other ones that are okay. I like the Muppets version, the George C. Scott version is okay, but none of them really capture the magic that the 1951 version had because of Alistair Sim. Because when he feels that feeling of elation and joy that he's alive and it's Christmas, you actually believe it when he says it. When you see Kelsey Grammer try to do it, as we now know is a Psycho, and we see like George C. Scott is always grouchy, trying to pretend to be happy, oh, great, it's Christmas. Like, you don't buy it. But Sim, you absolutely do. The movie, to Jeff's point, it does feel a little scary. Like those, I think the reason it's scary is because it's an older print, and whenever we think of like ghost photos that we see them in like these old scratchy prints, and they have that transparent effect that they put on it, which I'd love to know how they did that back then. So,
but it's interesting to your point too, Mike, because there's also in old photographs, because they didn't want to have too many moving parts. Like people always sort of stood stoic because they had to let the thing sort of freeze them while the emotion took hold. But the other thing that's interesting about this movie, when you go and return to it again and again, you realize how stark it is. And this is a very poor London. We're not in the rich, extravagant side where maybe the Queen and the rich people are living. This is the It's very cold, it's very barren. The streets look like they're dangerous at night.
Mm-hmm.
And you're often left alone, which I think gives a sense of isolation, which not only works for us to empathize with Ebenezer Scrooge, who's very isolated here, but also I think just feeling that this is not a very Christmassy, Christmas spirity place, maybe in the Cratchit house, of course, but even there, it's so intimate. They've got so many kids and it's a very tight little space, but it's filled with love from wall to wall. And, even when Scrooge comes home, he's got way too much house for his needs and it's not even furnished. The one room he's in where he's having his bowl of porridge to help him sleep, looks so barren, like other than the bed, that chair doesn't look comfortable. He's got literally nothing else around it except the nightstand where he's putting the bowl when Marley comes to visit. The other thing that I think, just want to say another thing about Alistair Sim in this that I think is interesting. Two little extra thoughts. One is, with George C. Scott and even Patrick Stewart to some degree when he did it, and even Michael Caine, they're big men, they're tall men, they have a certain amount of stature. And, George C. Scott always kind of looks like he's looking down at you. And, he's always sort of this intimidating physical presence. And even Patrick Stewart had that. And I think Michael Caine, who's over 6'2", I think. I don't know exactly how tall Alistair Sim is, but he never seems tall here.
Mm-hmm.
And even when he's the grumpy Scrooge, he's never looking down, like sneering, over his nose at him.
Yeah.
He's like this.
Yeah.
He's like looking out from under his eyes, like almost like he's ashamed to raise his head and even talk. And I think it makes him sad. One last thing I'm just going to say that to me it might be my favorite little part in this film, as many great parts as there are to love. But I love it when Scrooge goes over to his nephew's for the Christmas dinner. And there's that little scene where he's interacting with the housemaid or whatever who comes and gets his coat. And he's unsure of going into the room where they're singing and dancing and making merry, as they say. And you can just see how vulnerable Scrooge is. Like, do I even dare do this? Maybe I have ruined it. I should have said yes 2 days ago or whatever. And he looks at her, and she's this working class girl that most people would not look to for affirmation or sort of approval. And he looks to her like, is it okay? Like suddenly breaking down the class system even.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. And she's like, yeah, go ahead, please. It's all fine. And then he's like, oh, thank you. So sweet. I just love that moment because even there, Scrooge is not this, 1%er.
Yeah.
He's equal to that person who's working class and probably is in a small room up, on the side, and she gets up early to make the breakfast.
Yeah.
I just love that there are moments like that in this film and that they continue to sort of make Scrooge vulnerable, empathetic and very sympathetic.
Yeah. I wonder, not, I was losing my track of thought for a second, but why do you think so many other adaptations are made? Like this movie's been adapted to death, but it actually takes some big swings. And I'm going to throw the spoiler banners up for this particular part. Although, if you haven't seen A Christmas Story or you don't know the story, it has been spoiled for you. Like, where have you been? So, anyways, here's a scene from, I'm just going to call it Scrooge because that's what it was originally titled, where his sister dies on him and he forgot to stick around for her final words. And that was his problem, was his stubbornness. And that's something we don't see in a lot of other adaptations. So let's take a look.
Promise me.
Promise you what, Fan? I'll promise you anything, dearest. Only that there isn't going to be any need. You're going to get well again, Fan. You're going to get well again, Fan. Fan, you're going to get well again.
Promise me you'll take care of my boy.
Yeah. He didn't hear those final words to take care of Fred. And because of that, he mistreated his nephew and did the same thing his father did to him. Because when Ebenezer was a child, his mother died in childbirth delivering him. And then as he becomes an adult,
for
Yeah.
killing his beloved friend. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And she wanted him to take care of her. That was her, and he didn't stick around. And why? Because he was a stubborn man. And a lot of stubborn men, they like to just think about reacting to the moment rather than reflecting on the moment. And when he does what he does, just storming out, not waiting for her to die, I think that was the moment he as a person died. And we don't see that kind of weight in other Christmas carols. We don't see that subtext. I don't remember his mother dying in childbirth. I don't remember his sister dying in childbirth. And then they have these factors where I'm sure the other Scrooge stories have their moments where you see how Scrooge became Scrooge, but this one really digs deeper into his mind, and because it digs deeper and is darker, very unchristmas like to have two characters die on a deathbed within one movie, but that weight makes the alleviation of life so much better. Mark, would you have any thoughts on the film? I saw you just kind of sitting there. I don't want you to feel left out.
No, I don't feel left out. I'm listening and taking it in. No, I guess for me, it's all about why this story was adapted so many times. It's because of the story and the morality tale that it's telling, regardless of the version you have. One of the main theme of it is a reflection on what has gotten you to this point that you're at, especially if you're in a low point. Maybe not necessarily angry or grumpy at everyone, but you're down and you're out, because holidays are a low point for a lot of people. A lot of people have problems dealing with the holidays. It just, for whatever reason, whatever they had happened in their past up until that point, and that's what you have here is, that's coming to light to Scrooge, that he may have been buried. And so that story is a universal theme. And so I think, the whole point of it is appreciate what you have, be grateful what you have. All those trials could be ones, and to really sound like a self-improvement person, which I'm not, but to sound a little cheesy, but it is the holidays. Basically reflect and appreciate and understand that those things that happened there, yeah, you made those choices, but you still have time to change. You still have time to get better. You still have time to improve it. Those things don't define you in the future if you don't let them.
Yeah.
If you let those things in the past define who you're going to be in the future, then you're going to be staring at your grave with death standing next to you and looking pretty dang scary.
Yeah.
Well, that's very true.
So I think that's why this story's been adapted so much more than, say, many other stories, is just the fact of that. It's something that's relatable to a lot of people, to everyone. And in this case, it's just told very well, overall, and its effectiveness. As you guys mentioned, there's some scenes in here that you don't see in other adaptations. Scrooge in this one doesn't feel quite so much as a caricature as others. I will defend Muppet Christmas Carol, though, because the Muppets one, that's a completely separate movie. It's a Muppet movie.
That's why it's the only other one.
It's well done.
Yeah.
But that is the only other one compared to this one, I think, that's effective in its storytelling and doesn't shy away from the darker scenes. And as we know, they even went darker with the Christmas Carol before they had to cut. And there's a couple scenes that are being restored back into it, or have been. There's a whole sequence, I think, in there that they cut out that they're putting back into that film. But it's just, that's why I think this is told so many times. It's just that being told so many times, you have many examples of not the way to do it, and this is the way to do it, is this one, and so that's where I'm at with that.
Yeah, I actually totally agree with you on Muppet Christmas Carol. I know I use Michael Caine as an example of always not as good as Alistair Stim, but then again, the fact that he did play it so seriously next to all these Muppets is really great, because I like it in comedies when the actors play it like they're not doing a joke. Like,
well, that's the first rule of comedy: is people in a comedy must not know they're in a comedy. It's a drama to them.
That's why when I saw something like I liked the movie, but when I watched Anaconda yesterday, it's like the one thing with Jack Black that annoys me is that he seems like a really cool guy, but he always seems like he's hamming it up for the camera, where he's like, "Oh wow, guys, God, whoa!" And I'm like, "Dude, chill. Just say the lines normally." And you get a lot of people don't do that here. I like how straight they play it, and yeah, it gets really dark. And I like that because the other versions, they water it down more for the kids. They kind of become like the mock version of A Christmas Carol that they do in Scrooge with people doing the somersaults and all that. But at the end of the day, when it comes to all these Christmas Carol movies, it might be a case of it won the race because it was like one of the first ones to be adapted
Mhm.
that reran on television again and again and again. And I think when people see those reruns, they're like, "Oh yeah, Christmas Carol. That's that book from Charles Dickens that neither have I read. I haven't read either, but I see on TV all the time. And here's all these new versions. So this movie kind of encapsulated it the best, but because it was the first, I think it kind of gave it an advantage where everyone else was just trying to replicate that film.
Well, the thing. Oh, go ahead, Jeff. Sorry.
No, please go ahead.
I was just gonna say the challenge you run into is what you ran into, if I may bring it up. True Grit is
Yeah.
a prime example of the challenge you run into basing your film off of a book, off of a well-written book. And if you hold close to the source material, and the film previously to you held close to the source material, people who, as you mentioned, may not have read the books or even aware it's based off of a book will go, "Oh, this is a remake of this," when it's not. It's holding close to the source material. The Christmas Carol versions that we get all are trying, most of them except for Scrooge, are trying to hold close to the source material, because if you vary away from it and you stumble there, your film's going to fail because everybody knows the story. So you either tell the story that's accurate, similar to the book, or you don't do something different, but you're kind of challenged either way. And this one, you're right, is kind of set the bar as far as the film version of the story. And so people can try to match this film or try to match the source material, but your average viewing audience is just going to compare it to this film.
Yeah.
And not to the source material. So you could have an accurate movie and that's accurate to the book, but if it's not done as well as this movie was, it won't matter.
Yeah. Now, how's everyone discovered the film? Was it all just reruns on television? Because that's how I caught it.
Yeah, in fact, that's where it's got its reputation, at least in America, because it was run on television so much. It was a big hit in England. It was a modest hit in America. Americans were not ready for the full Dickens, if you will, because it is dark. And, there were distributors who looked at it and went, "Holy crap, this is a scary movie." And it's like, did you read the book? Because it is. I think, to your question, Mike, about why there were so many other versions of it, I think for many, many years, people in Hollywood thinking maybe there wasn't a definitive version, at least not a definitive version for the American audiences that wanted it a little cuter, a little warmer. I mean, look at the fact that it's done at the Goodman every year and in so many local theater productions and stuff like that. And kids are in it. And, it's become this sort of, almost like this, I don't want to say simple, easy, stand-up double, but dare I say a pretty family-friendly show. And I think while there's a certain amount of family friendliness in some of the aspects of the original Dickens novel, and even in this version from 1951, it's also very, very adult. And we forget at that time period when Charles Dickens was writing, the people of England were very much into ghost stories. They were very much into the macabre and death. And, it was almost like our sort of true crime fascination today that, every other book, and every other podcast, and every other documentary on television tends to be about some real murder. But it was true in those days, maybe because death was all around them. This movie, to your point about the deathbeds, it's like, yeah, guess what? People died in childbirth. People died from a lot of things in those days because there just wasn't health care, and it was cold and people got sick, et cetera, et cetera. But the populace was very obsessed with sort of dark material. ghosts and fairies and other world stuff and supernatural. So this played right into that. But in America, coming off of World War II, this is a little too dark for them. So maybe that's why there's a version of it. And I would also point out that one of the things that I can understand where distributors were probably a little bit freaked out, but for example, when you introduce the character of Tiny Tim in this movie, he's introduced in this wonderful moment where he's looking in the window of a toy store and, delighting at, the sort of moving characters and sort of, that kind of stuff. And it's interesting that Adam Sell in this scoring here, he has this dun 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 dun, which is very sweet and stuff. But then he introduces dissonant chords. Bum ba da bum 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 dun da da da. It kind of starts to get a little dark because this child is not well, and he's foreshadowing that this is a doomed kid. He may have this momentary joy, but I mean, for them to do that in a movie, it's like, what? Yeah, that's right. And that's what Dickens was doing throughout the entire film. I also say one other thing that just this scared the hell out of me. I wanted to ask if you two did as well. But we've all seen Marley's ghost, and he's pretty upset, and he's got the chains, and he was a bad egg, and so he's carrying around all these lock boxes and everything else, and can't do anything to help the poor starving people on the street anymore, which they brilliantly show all these ghosts trying to throw money at this poor woman in because they're ghosts and they're not, solvent coins. She can't grab them. Now they're trying. They didn't do it in their real existence. But when Scrooge taunts him by saying, like, you might just be a bit of just a bit of beef, undercooked potato, a piece of cheese, I could swallow this toothpick and be done with you, And Marley lets out this howl that scared me shitless when I was a kid. But that's what it is in the book. And it's very scary. And it's like, again, Hearst never forgets that this is a ghost story, that there's dark stuff going on. Yes, there's joy. Yes, there's happiness. Yes, I was feeling rather merry yesterday. But when Bob Cratchit comes into that office, he's afraid. Like, is this my last day? Am I going to get fired? Because this guy ain't very nice to me. And Marley's pretty upset about Alistair Scrooge's, sort of cynicism as well. But I love the fact that they aren't afraid to embrace those moments. I mean, Michael Hordern, who played Marley, was a fairly young actor when he made this, but he plays him very well as this old man, and he's drawn, and he's very sort of soft and old, and woe is me. But when he lets out that, you believe in me, it's like, it's terrifying. And that was probably not very, amenable to people who are like, we're going to get a family audience into this film. No, we're going to have to reupholster the seats because the kids are going to pee their pants when they hear that howling banshee.
Well, I would like to imagine how the audiences reacted to that. The few who did when it came out in the theaters. I know they were going to play it at Radio City Music Hall at one point for Christmas, and they decided not to because they thought it was too dark.
Yeah, well, and you know the famous story about when Walt Disney showed Snow White there. The kids all peed in their seats when the evil queen turned into that witch. It was too frightening for kids. But, of course, they loved it even though they peed.
Well, it reminds me, I don't know if they have the right anymore, but when I was a little kid, and this is like the 90s, in Disney World, they had a Snow White ride.
Oh, yeah.
But it's like through like the witch's perspective, and it's like the creepiest.
She shows up in every corner.
Yeah. Oh my God, that is terrifying. And I like this is a testament to the practical effects of the film, because when you see Bob Marley and it's just transparent against the scratchy. I'm sorry, Jacob Marley.
Bob Marley was there like, yeah,
man. Did I just say Bob Marley?
You got to repent, man.
Just chill, man. Just chill.
Everything will be all right.
And have a nice pudding. Anyway.
Get together. Hope you don't die of cancer. Yeah, but anyways, that was a little too dark. Yeah, when you get to Jacob Marley, not Bob Marley, it helps to have that old film, although it wasn't old at the time, the limitations of the celluloid mixed with his transparency looks more believable than like the transparent ghosts we get in movies today. And I think also when you put it in color, it kind of diminishes the effect. But then you had that other great wide shot where you see like all of the chained lost souls together in one image. It looks like something you would dream, And I think that's a problem with a lot of special effects, is that they're too fancy where it looks like there's not like too much detail, but the animation of it is distracting. But I do like the fact that CGI does have a limitation that people notice because it challenges filmmakers to go further. But it's great to see a movie from this time actually have some impressive visual effects, minus the whole like hourglass thing through the tunnel that just looked like kind of like a little tiny miniature. But yeah, that movie had that kind of innovation. It had its darkness. And if I go on my notes here, well, it also had the definitive, um, Ebenezer Scrooge, because Alistair Sim, he's believable when he's happy, he's believable when he's mad, and he has the perfect face for that character.
And
Just
those big eyes that look frightened.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
exactly.
like look at the picture in the corner there. I mean,
Exactly. I'm literally
it's
looking
a
at it right
great
now.
face. That's like a man who is pretty shook by what he's seen, and whether it's ghosts or the tragedies of life. I love that one scene where he starts to turn, and the ghost of Christmas Past goes, "No, you must watch this."
Yeah.
Moments like that are even funny, even though they're sort of tragic too. Hey, can I ask you both a question? Because I was thinking about this as I was watching it a few days ago, knowing that we were going to do this show. You're talking about all the different versions of A Christmas Carol, and by and large, unless they're the Susan Lucci or the Bill Murray versions that sort of updated to modern times, most of them treat the second and the third ghosts very similarly. Father Christmas is generally decked out as like this buoyant, ebullient, bearded man, larger than life, who's like, come enjoy the feast and festivities. And of course, the ghost of Christmas Future is sort of, as described in the book, sort of shadows. And, they usually do that by having him be sort of this cloaked figure with just maybe a bony finger out. But in almost all the different versions of The Christmas Carol or Scrooge that have been done, very different versions of the first ghost. And I wonder what you think about that. Like the version here is an older man, but it's oftentimes played as a child because Dickens described it in the original book as being both old and young, which I think is like nostalgia is, the old part, but it's about Scrooge's childhood by and large, or youth, if you will. But they've always been sort of a different interpretation. And this one I thought had a very interesting one because he almost seems like an angel. But what do you guys think of at least the way he's portrayed here, or as we were talking about with the different versions, the various versions of that Ghost of Christmas Past?
Well, it's pretty interesting that to me, he just seems like a suffering old man. And that's kind of like the way I saw him all the time. I never saw the adaptations where he's a child. Which ones were those? Because that's like...
Well, there's an animated version that was done by, I believe it's Richard Williams who did an animated version. In fact, one animated short in 1971 or something. And
that's the one with Alistair Sim,
does the voice. Yeah, does the voice. And that won the Oscar. I think it was the first Oscar for animated short.
Wow. Now I have to watch it.
Yeah, and it's just about half an hour, which I think is the cutoff for an animated short, but it's very well done. But I think there's a child Ghost of Christmas Past in that one. And it's been portrayed as, even Carol Kane's sort of feminine, youthful ditz in
love
Scrooge.
Carol Kane.
She's brilliant. She's brilliant.
She's such a highlight of Scrooge, Carol Kane's version, because she just, I love that. Every time in Scrooged when I watched it, when her part would come up, I loved it. That was my favorite sequences. But
was that the angel went around and beat the crap out of Scrooge all the time?
Yeah, she had
I think in some respects, though, that maybe part of it is, we tend to see the past through our lens. And even though the ghost here is sort of showing him what really happened, it's still pretty close to Scrooge's sad reflections and retrospective that he doesn't want to remember. I see a boy left alone at school, whereas classmates have gone home, and or even young Patrick McNee from the Avengers as the young Jacob Marley, where they decide to buy out Fezziwig and stuff like that. They're just kind of like smug, like, well, we've got the money, you don't. So we're as good as the bank, and we're going to make this thing. But they're not like evil, like, oh, we're going to ruin you. It doesn't even. They aren't even considering it. Their memory is just that we were good businessmen.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why it's sort of a child and it's a little more youthful or whatever. But it's an interesting choice that is not very consistent from film to film.
Yeah, sometimes it's female, sometimes it's male.
Right. That's too much.
Actually, I think past in Scrooged was actually Buster Poindexter. He was the past because he was the cabbie, and then Carol Kane, I
Yeah.
think, was the present.
Oh, is that
She
true?
was,
Oh,
yeah, I think
maybe
I
that's
think.
right.
I-
Well,
I-
anyway,
Yeah, I remember
but,
the
but
past.
the
there are these
portrayal,
interpretations.
it's a different
Falls.
it's a different portrayal of
Yeah, for sure.
but yeah, either older man or a woman, usually with a wreath. Yeah, you're right, kind of angelic of sorts. I mean, even the Mr. Magoo version, I think.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Because there was
And
Mr. Magoo.
that's not a bad Christmas Carol either. In fact, for a long time, that was a very popular one. I don't think kids today know who Mr. Magoo is, but
No,
when I was a kid, Mr. Magoo was on in syndication.
same
Oh my
here.
gosh.
Same here. They had Mr. Magoo.
Roadhog.
And if you're gonna have an animated character play Scrooge, Mr.
Yeah.
Magoo is gonna be the one that you would want
Yes.
to do that for sure. But no, Christmas past is always varied. But you're right. The present usually, except for Scrooge, usually is like Santa Claus almost is
Yeah,
like
right.
very bountiful. And that, and then the future is usually the Grim Reaper of a variation of a Grim Reaper type of design, you know.
I don't know if anyone noticed in this version. I saw it when I was watching on my TV. When the Grim Reaper turns around, you can see like the actor's face behind
there's
like
a
the black mask.
There's a
Black
black
mask,
like
yeah.
veil over his
Yeah.
face. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I felt smart at that moment.
you mentioned the special effects, and you know, they did a lot of things back then. What I always love about older films, and people, you know, that's why I'm a very large advocate of watching older films, even if people, because back then they were figuring out how to do things that, you know, they wanted to do. In this case, I think they did like some they did, you know, reverse projection to where, like, for the door knocker, you'd have the knocker as a still, but then they project the face of the actor they recorded on it. You know, they do a lot of creative physical things in the production angle to give you these special effects, and I always appreciate that. So that's one of the things I really liked about the 51 version, is just watching it as a film lover in the craft of what they did in order to pull it off. Because if you think about the things they had to do to pull off what they do, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah,
You know,
and today those effects would take seconds or maybe 30
I can
minutes.
do them on my computer right now.
Yeah.
I could literally do it on my computer in a few seconds now. And back then they had to put glass, they had to record it on film a couple different ways and then layer it. I mean, if you ever really want to appreciate older filmmaking, just look at any of those behind the scenes old making of the Disney animated films.
Oh yeah.
And how they used plates that were painted and they would shift them manually to give the, I mean, you know, just the stuff they would do to pull off these effects. And especially in here, when you're trying to do a supernatural film from 1951.
Mark and Mike, have you ever seen the how they did the transformation of Frederick March from Dr. Jekyll into Mr. Hyde back in, I think, 1932? To your point, Mark, they did it with moving plates of glass that had certain colors on them. And so certain colors blanked out the makeup. But when it was sort of crossed over and he's acting like crossed over, then suddenly he's got dark circles under his eyes and lines and so that, and it's so simple and yet it's brilliant, and you watch that and it's seamless, and you just go, wow, these wizards really knew their stuff. And it's like any magician, once you realize the trick, it seems obvious, but it still looks incredible. And to know that somebody figured out how to do some of those things, whether it's an animated movie and rotoscoping and moving pieces of glass across each other, or just different colored sort of gels across the lights that hid certain effects until they were pulled away, and then you see the dark shadows and the lines drawn on an actor's face to look more beastly. It's fantastic, and those were the special effects of their day, which were as impressive as sort of CGI in our day, because they were movie wizardry that people were dazzled by. Like, how'd they do that?
Yeah, and you know, you hear today about how actors for a while, early green screen, when they were doing a lot of compositing and green screen, how trouble they have acting towards a ping pong ball or whatnot. Let's let's transport back to 1951. They've got transparent people here and that, and Sim is talking to them.
Yeah.
And the way they did that, my understanding with the film is they'd film the other person and then they would, layer that film on top of the other
Yes,
to give
right.
you your transparent. So in theory, that person wasn't there. He was acting to someone who wasn't there for sure. They may have covered it up and the person was there, but there's someone off screen giving him lines and he's trying to act towards nothing there, necessarily. So I'm not 100% how they did it, but I imagine that's how they did it. So he's acting in, a big empty bedroom with Marley there, and he has to act to react to Marley, though Marley may not be there. The actor may not be there.
Right.
And from my brief understanding of Alistair Sim, I think he was more of a comedic actor than an actor.
Yeah.
And here he does serious really well.
Really well.
Yeah, because when he looks down and sad, like when he's saying goodbye to someone, like I believe it when he cries. Not like other people's like, oh, I have to cry now. Don't make noise, cover my eyes. Like, no, he makes it very true. One thing I do like about these practical effects done by hands is that it reminds us what makes movies great, which is teamwork. And when you have people working together to create something, that's beautiful. If you have like AI and robots do it, even CGI, it's not as impressive as something on screen because you could tell people were there. With CGI, I just imagine it's like the Minecraft guy, or not Minecraft, the World of Warcraft guy from South Park. It's just not the same thing, man. It doesn't have that feeling to it. But,
well, the other thing that I think this movie does really well is, and to Mark's point, they use the visual effects very well, but they use them sparingly. It never overwhelms the film. This is still a film about characters, and even if it's Marley who's translucent and you're wondering how did they do that, even if you don't know, it's still about Marley trying to convince his old friend and partner that you're in a heap of trouble, boy, and he's not necessarily getting through to him. And even some of the other visual effects where, the characters run through the others, you can sort of see the transition moment, but it's still about what is the character's reaction. Like, oh, I almost hugged my old friend, but no, I can't. And, it keeps focusing on the people. I also have to say, as much as it's made, and I started out by making a lot in the discussion tonight about, the one take where Scrooge is going crazy and he's scaring the housekeeper and all that. But, it's so wonderful. And you get the interaction to, again, character with him with that little boy down the street, like, oh, he's a remarkable boy. What an amazing little boy. I mean, like he's suddenly never noticed children before, but now he knows that this kid is pretty plucky and pretty smart for a little guy. The one that's big as me. Oh, what a marvelous little boy. But I also love it when he dances with his nephew's wife, who he's been so dismissive of and rude to. And the camera lingers on her. She has maybe 3 lines in the whole movie, but she's important. In that moment, she's important. And just by having her have such presence, you realize that Scrooge does know who she is, and he's been bad and rude to her too. And, she's sort of startled too and delighted, and yet it's giving her enough time to let that come across, which is wonderful. I just want to say one other thing too about the casting, just 3 quick little things that I think, see what your response is. But like George Cole, who plays the young Ebenezer Scrooge, is also terrific in this film. And he went on to become a big star in Britain, but he also became a good friend with Alistair Sim. And there's a resemblance between them. But I mean, Sim became very good friends with him, and they had a lifelong friendship. I also love Mervyn Jones as Bob Cratchit. He's so vulnerable. And I love the fact that he's a little bit older and, when he breaks down and says, I think he would be happy with us. And, he's not quite buying it himself, even though he's trying to sell to the family. It breaks your heart. But the other thing I have to say, and most of the versions of Christmas Carol skip over it because it's so unsavory, but when the housekeeper goes and is selling the bed curtains, and there's that one, all the actors in that scene, but the guy who's the main guy who's kind of running the show on what's bartered and traded, that casting is straight out of a Dickens illustration. Where they found that actor, kudos to that casting director, but it looks so authentic, and it's such a disarming and sort of unseemly scene, and then you realize, oh my God, he's nothing but the value of his bed sheets to his housekeeper, who probably was the closest thing he had to a friend or an acquaintance. It's a tough scene to watch, and again, the script, the movie director, the whole production does not shy away from any of that. But great casting too, which I think is in a way its own great special effect here, because it's so well done.
Especially with movies from that decade that was heavily reliant on dialogue over visuals.
Right.
You had to keep the audience engaged. So the actors had to do a lot more. I remember this back in the days when a lot of actors could sing and dance, and we get some of those these days, but we get some who don't. Like, as much as I love La La Land, Ryan Gosling couldn't really sing that well. So, you get those kind of awkward moments.
I'll reserve my opinion of La La Land.
I will not be offended at all. Trust me.
Don't you also love the fact that they throw in some really dark, cheeky humor too? Like when Scrooge is told to go visit Marley because he's on his deathbed, it's going to be his last hour, and he goes there, and at the top of the stairs, you're looking like the devil ghost or something himself is the Undertaker, and he's such a spindly guy. He looks like the child snatcher from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. And Scrooge makes some sort of comment to him like, "Oh, didn't take you long." He goes like, "Oh, this is a competitive business, sir." Hey, we're all suffering to put food on the table and make rent, and death is my business, but I got to go where the death is.
One interesting thing about Scrooge is that is he just like a rich jerk, or is he actually just trying to balance his pocketbook? Because he's actually very good at that. He nickels and dimes people, but it keeps him wealthy, which kind of is a commentary maybe at that time of rich men stay rich because they know how to keep their money, and they know in order to be rich, you have to be a little selfish. I don't know. That's kind of what I get from it.
Well, you have it when he talks to that one guy who's like, "Oh yeah, you owe me money. I'm sorry. Are you here to pay it? No, I can't yet, sir. I'm still, well, why can't you then?" And he is so dismissive of it. It's almost like, if you can't handle your finances, to hell with you. He doesn't know what his personal life is. Most people who have bad finances and have trouble with money have had tragedies in their life, and bad things that have happened to them that affect those causes. We're all one, sort of catastrophic health problem away from losing everything. And certainly in that time, with famine and rats in the street and everything else going on, it was not easy to survive, especially if you weren't plentiful in the moolah department to get decent health care. But to your point, I think, he's not necessarily greedy, like he loves money over people.
Because his house is pretty barren.
Yeah, he's just smart enough to save his money and not connect to people, so he puts nothing out there, and then he's got enough money to live well. But I think at the end of the day, his primary thing is his pride in being a good businessman. That he's got money and that he can use it to keep business going. Even he's not going to chit chat with those fat cats at the last bell outside this exchange. He's like, I'm here just to do the business and then get home. I'm not going to talk with you people, even though you're more like me and could be my friends.
Yeah. And the funniest thing is, when I'm trying to find this movie, I found like 3 versions. One was on Amazon. I paid like $3 for, and it sounded horrible. Like, they sounded like they were talking into a tin can. Yeah. And then there's a YouTube link I sent you guys, and that also, like, it had less of the sound problems, but they were still there. And then Tubi, of all places, had the best version of it. But it made me think, this is crazy, because if there were physical copies of that movie available, you'd get it in the best quality without all these problems, without the disruptions, without the commercials in between, without logging in your password, without having to worry about your internet crashing.
I mean, usually TMC runs the good version of it, and they give a nice hype about it. But you're right. I mean, how many times you see in the bargain bin at Walgreens, and it's a colorized version of it too, no less.
Turner. Damn you, Turner.
Exactly. It went public domain. Turner. It went public domain, and they just kind of shat all over it, even though, when we were kids, and you can still find it. It's run in some good places. But yeah, if they do a really spiffy job on it and did a better sound design on it, they could almost put it in the theaters, and I think people would go and see it.
Yeah, because I think people want to see it, and also people want to own it, and I don't. And I was looking for where it's available, and there's old, like, used Blu-rays and DVDs of it. And I'm just thinking, if they're used, they could either be disc rotted, or people put their fingerprints on it, or the cat
No,
scratched it, but you can barely see the
we
scratch.
we've got to remember though that, and I think we take it for granted now, especially
Yeah.
Gen Xers. We take it for granted because, I was born 75, grew up in the video age to where you can archive stuff in that. And, they kept copies of it and they would transfer film prints to video and keep them archived because studios finally realized, oh, there's a home video market we can take advantage of. So they started saving their prints. But a lot of these films in the older days, they didn't necessarily keep the original prints anymore afterwards, or theaters would get them. And, once the theater got it, they didn't ship it back. If they didn't ship it back, they stole it and put it into, but it wasn't kept. They weren't kept in the best conditions. They weren't, especially, a film like this, especially overseas. Hollywood did a little bit better job, but especially foreign cinema. You look at some prints of older foreign films and you're like, holy crap, like Bicycle Thief and that, you look at those, they aren't
did
the
have
best.
a sense of wanting to keep them like they were important enough. I mean, you're right. I mean, even some of the great movies in Hollywood system, they find them under like old clothes in a costume shop corner.
Yeah.
And like who's cataloging this stuff? How is this stuff treated so poorly? Or, when they were putting together Stanley Kubrick's Spartacus, they found some scenes that had they wanted to restore between Tony Curtis and Laurence Olivier and some other scenes to make more of a big deal of it. And, they're in terrible condition. And they're like these cut film strips that ended up probably on the cutting room floor, and nobody bothered to say, well, let's preserve them just to be on the safe side. I mean, a lot of the stuff they had to make up or make do with what they could. But yeah, isn't that a funny thing, Mark, that so often these films weren't really just treated as sort of art?
Yeah, well, they weren't archived them because after a certain run, they figured, oh, they're done. It's so that's why it's always
they
rare.
didn't see television coming where they could show movie reruns over and over again.
One of the biggest things is Metropolis is the biggest patchworked film from ever. And now we have all but maybe 2 minutes left, but it took how many decades and across the world where they would find something in like Argentina or Spain, they'd find like half a reel, or Doctor Who as well. Doctor Who, there's stuff, the early episodes, there's full storylines that were lost. It's a project of Who fans to try to find it. And occasionally, like you said, Jeff, they'll find like a reel of some guy who was a grip on one of the shows, and they ended up taking one of the cans of the episode with them home because no one looked, or they find it, but those older films, that's why I think people don't appreciate why it's such a cool thing when they do find a lost film intact, or when they do find a print that looks really good of a very old film. You're like, wow, because
and thank God for the Academy, Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, the AFI, Martin Scorsese, Spielberg. These people have spent a lot of time and money and charity work, if you will, to preserve these films that need the preservation, and their classics and their art. And it's just a continual shock to see how badly a lot of these old prints have been treated. And sure, film is old, and television had the kinescopes and those things that look terrible. And sometimes you see those on YouTube, and it's like, oh my God, did they shoot it through gravy? No, it's just a dilapidated kinescope videotape. But there needs to be a better take on this stuff. It's funny, you may know this, guys, but I think about 10 years ago, they did all of the old Sherlock Holmes movies with Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce, and they redid them. They also did that with the Twilight Zone about 20 years ago, where they took all the old things because they were going to show them on Sci-Fi on New Year's, and it was becoming more and more a hit. And they finally did them right. Like they redid the color corrections, and now you watch those old Twilight Zones on Sci-Fi or some of those older shows and stuff, and you're like, wow, that looks great. You can see these crushed blacks, and it's very high contrast, and it's genius. But it takes a conspicuous effort because most of it has not been given the respect and treatment that it deserves, and it's shocking.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. You look at a copy of Citizen Kane, and that movie was 10 years younger than this movie,
Right.
and yet its preservation is far superior than
Mhm.
Scrooge. Like I'm granted it got the good old Criterion treatment, which is the chef's kiss of preservation. But this movie is available in like 3 different streaming formats. You have to find basically inflated priced like Blu-rays and DVDs that people have reselling it. And it's kind of scary where physical media is gonna be, because especially with the whole Netflix Disney, or not Disney, the Netflix Warner Brothers buyout. So I'm wondering what will happen to movies like this and how we can keep it preserved before it
Oh,
totally
you've
goes
got your
away.
pirates. Don't worry. You've got your digital pirates out
Thank
there
God for the
recording,
pirates.
recording the MP4 high def versions of this. They're ripping them from streaming. You get a film that hits streaming on Amazon or whatever, it will be in Pirate Bay or the pirate sites the next day. High def digital versions.
It'll be on New York streets being sold in a.
And then on New
Yarg, I'm a
York,
New York
then
pirate.
on New York streets and
Yes.
such. So
Hey,
I mean,
got
you-
Marty's
but I
a
mean, you-
here. It hasn't opened yet, but I
you-
got a copy for you.
you know,
Hey, I got a copy of the new Scorsese film. What do you want here? Sorry.
and even us Gen Xers, you roll back the camera 40 years, your tapes now, they're finding VHS is getting rot, disc rot as
Yeah,
well. So
happened to me.
there's projects, I think Madison, Wisconsin, I think the university there, but a couple other universities or other folks are looking at preserving VHS tapes now, VHS copies, because you had so much of the big VHS boom that you had a lot of stuff that was created. I've got a number of them. I someone laughed, but I bought this Purina dog promo video that was shot. I bought it for like $0.25. It was on VHS, but I'm like, there's so many of those programs in that, those specialty programs and such they
Yeah.
did that are sitting on the shelf on a disc, on a VHS tape that's starting to rot. And someone made that. There's production behind it. And while it might not have significant historical, it's a time capsule.
Flintstone commercials where they're smoking and selling Lucky Strikes.
Yes.
What?
Yes.
Hey, Bonnie, nothing goes better with my brontosaurus burger than a nice cool Kent or whatever.
Winston cigarettes. That's
Jesus,
right.
God. Fred,
Chesterfield.
are you going
There
to
you go.
share your Chesterfields? Oh, not with you, darling. Oh, my God.
It's funny. Somewhere
Something for the
within
kids, as Tim Robbins said in Hudson Proxy. For the kids.
It's funny because at my parents' house, when I come and visit them, my dad used to own an old video store, and he still has stuff from the store. He's got like this whole case, and there's like a copy of Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me, and Independence Day, and all this stuff. And I remember as a kid, there's old tapes of them doing a commercial where we're both babies and someone's doing like a tie-in with the local pizza place. And it's like, I want to find that video so I can upload it online, because who knows where it is now. That's like footage of us as kids that I want to preserve and is rotting away.
Oh, sure.
But thanks to digital technology, it's kind of a double-edged sword. You got your pirates who preserve everything, and then you got your regular folk who ends up kind of losing movies and commercials and pieces of history. Like there's uploads of 9/11 without the commercials just to see what was on TV at the time. See the contrast. Like, oh, here's one of the most horrific things ever happening. Did you buy this pill? Did you buy this toy? Anyways, thousands are dying. Like, yeah, it's like one of those.
Well, they already sold off the commercial space, so they had to run.
Yeah,
with
they
it.
had
Yeah.
to,
Being
but
sensitive or insensitive.
Go ahead.
that's a whole other
place.
that's a whole other conversation, how 9/11 showed that there was business in 24-hour news cycle. But big business.
Well, I can
Anyway.
tell you this too, just as a quick little aside. I was in New York at the time of 9/11. I was there for business, and there was stuff that I saw that day in New York One, their cable channel there, and local news there that never was shown again after that first day. Somebody got involved. The government said, "We're not going to show those people falling from those towers ever again." And they have not shown them. They tried to do documentaries on them, and they cannot get a hold of the footage because the networks and whatever, I think there were threats or whatever, would not, they didn't have it anymore, or they said they didn't.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, so that's why you have movies like A Christmas Carol, especially when they go public domain, because then companies don't see the need to restore them or anything
Right.
because, well, they're PD now. So there's no value to them,
Mhm.
because they're looking at the monetary angle. It would take someone who is just looking at preserving art to find an original print and do a cleanup, or take the time to do a cleanup, like they've done many times with Star Wars.
Yeah.
There's the despecialized editions in that where
Mhm.
people have tracked down like detectives to find original prints so they could remaster them and clean them up. That's what it'll take for something like, A Christmas Carol from 1951 to get like that. Just as an aside, I forgot the name of the person, and I apologize, folks, but if you look it up, I think you can find the article. There was a woman who just constantly recorded TV on VHS tapes. Some guy's mom just did this because she wanted to record stuff and,
Oh
and
yeah,
keep
I've read
stuff.
about her. She has everything on it.
She
It's
had,
like
I
George
mean,
Costanza's dad keeping all the TV guides.
yeah, and it's like thousands of like massive amounts of tapes in her house that they've now taken and started to archive, because she's captured rare news breaks, commercials, stuff you couldn't find anywhere. She would record right off a broadcast and just record days worth of recordings
The
on
Marion
VHS.
Stokes Project?
I think so. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
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 And she
Now I
and
guess.
she did that. And I've even got that. I've got old tapes where I was recording TV shows like X-Files and that, because we couldn't watch them
Yeah.
right. And I'd stick one in occasionally, and you get these commercials that you forgot about that you can't find anywhere, So I mean, preservation is out there. I think, especially older stuff, I think it's worth it, if nothing else, to see the true art, because I saw a 16 millimeter for one of the horror fests I was at. They borrowed a 16 millimeter print of George Romero's A Night of the Living Dead, and they played a 16 millimeter print of it, and because their library had it, the university library had it in their archives. And let me tell you, even though it looked sepia and some of the stuff looked rough, there is some footage on that film that I was watching that looked like it was shot yesterday in a studio. It looked that clear. The movement and the picture and everything for that 16 millimeter film, parts of it looked beautiful. Was like the most beautiful shots I've seen that version of. And it was directly from the film playing in a projector. And, it's one of those things where these physical media things need to be archived and need to be preserved, because film looks so good.
Yeah.
When you actually see something shot on actual film.
Well, look at the pictures, the images you use, Mike, for your sort of placard here. I mean, the darks on the side of Sim's face, or even the grayscale that allows all 5 colors within the mouth of that boy that actor playing Tiny Tim. I mean, to see that in the detail that it is pretty extraordinary. And a lot of copies of Christmas Carol, or whatever you want to call it, Scrooge, don't show that. And maybe a lot of people have grown up never seen it.
Yeah. And the most amazing thing about this is that, thanks to the pirates out there and things like the despecialized edition, it was announced that in 2027, an original print of Star Wars was going to come out. And I'll tell you right now, if I start watching that movie and it says A New Hope, I'm walking out of the theater. I want the original prints. The other odd thing is George Lucas, the guy who pretends like these movies don't exist. In the 80s, he testifies to Congress about the colorization of film. And I don't know if you guys have seen Scrooge in color, but when Tiny Tim is looking through that window at the toys and it cuts back to him, it's like nightmare fuel. It's just weird.
It was a terrible trend. And
Turner's colorization, I'm glad that trend didn't last too long, but it lasted enough to give us some pretty horrible versions of some really classic films, because it looked like someone went and just pasteled everything.
Yeah.
And it was not good. You're like, I'd rather watch the black and white version. I think they did a colorized version of Casablanca I think he took like a lot of the different classics. He tried to get as much as possible, and he would do colorized versions, and you watch it, you're just like, no,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
no.
know. Oh God, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's just so ironic that George Lucas talked about, I guess, a colorization of film, and then look what he does to Star Wars. You know.
Yeah, well,
Yeah. Thanks, George.
do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah,
There you
exactly.
go.
That is humanity's hubris.
Yeah.
So I've said as much as I can think about with this movie.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone wants to add any other notes. No? Okay, class. Anyways.
I think the only thing I'd say is that this is an argument, and I will always be an advocate for look for films before 2000, before 1980, before 1950.
Yeah.
Look at some of those films, because what you see there is the techniques being used today. Yes, different tools, but at its core, when people talk about the volume and the stage and how the Mandalorian was shot with LCD screens all over, I'm like, you mean like 1933 King Kong, where they literally projected a forest behind the actors as they walked in front of it? Sounds quite similar to me.
Yep, some things never change.
No.
You know, and that's the beauty. You see the inception of these effects placed placed within the screen. Space Odyssey still looks fucking incredible when you watch it. You know, like I watched the 70 millimeter print in the music box whenever I can, and you always catch little details that you will never catch on the big screen, kind of like this guy who's in suspended animation next to me. But I have to say, I hope there is a way to preserve this movie, because this really does feel like the definitive Scrooge film. If you guys were to give it a rating from 1 to 4 Guinnesses, including the halves, Jeff, well, how many Guinnesses would you give this movie?
Bob, I'd give it 4 mugs of punch.
Very good. Very good indeed. Now I think about Mr. Burns was based off of Alistair Sim.
Yeah.
A little
There
bit.
you go.
Yeah,
a little
that
bit.
hairline and
Yeah.
You never know. Might have.
Mark, how many stars? I'm not gonna try to do. I can't do Alistair Sim. I have to practice.
Yeah, it's 4. It's 4. I mean, it's a
4.
4 out of 4. It's a classic. It's
Yeah.
it's one of those. There's a reason why you're still watching it while you see it on TV today. It ranks right up there with other big Christmas movies like It's a Wonderful Life and A White Christmas, Bells of St. Mary, those types of films. Because it's just, it's an earnest rendition of a group of folks doing something pretty crazy. I will only say that probably wasn't marketable in the US so well either, because it takes place in Britain. No offense to the American viewing audience, but it's guaranteed proof that you got your film set in a foreign or a country or a city or whatever. Harder sell.
No, you're right. There's a whatever you want to call it, xenophobia or culturalism or landism or geographicalism, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I mean, speaking of Charles Dickens, the musical version of Oliver Twist called Oliver has been revived on Broadway once in the last, and it opened in the 60s. And it's a great musical. It's got more memorable tunes. It was an Oscar-winning film. It's a great story, and people don't know it here because it's British. And we have our story of an orphan. It's called Annie. But yeah, there's a little bit of that weird, it's too English, so we're not going to make it.
Yeah,
and yet we love Love Actually more than the people in Britain love Actually. Go figure.
So I'm going to give it 4 out of 4. It's the definitive Christmas Carol for me. It's the one that I always think about. Maybe it is because it won the race, but at the same time, it digs a little deeper. It gets a little darker than the other films, and it does have the best Scrooge performance. So whenever I see the other versions, I know they always rerun the George C. Scott version, which isn't particularly well shot. And it also, George C. Scott, he's very believable as Scrooge, screwing my guys up there. But yeah, when he's supposed to be happy, he still seems grouchy. There's like Okay, actually, George, I'm happy. Yeah, yeah, get that fucker out of my face. Yeah, not the guy I want to be around. But guys, before I take off, Jeff, Mark, thank you for coming on. I hope you guys have an amazing holiday, whichever one it may be. And folks, I think this might be the last episode for the year. So if you liked it, like this video, remember to subscribe, ring the bell, see the little thing that says YPA reviews and click subscribe on that. You can find us on YouTube and Instagram and at YPA reviews and TikTok at YPA reviews Chicago. And my guests here, all their info is in the info on the video. So guys, thank you so much. Mark, Jeff, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Merry
Same to
Christmas.
you.
God bless us, everyone.
God bless us, everyone.
Everyone.
And now here's some fitting music for that.